There is one Ontario cottage town where the unsold homes sitting on the market right now would take 17.5 months to clear. Another where only one listing in 5 ever finds a buyer. A third where the typical waterfront home has quietly shed nearly $300,000 in value since the peak. And across the province, power of sale listings, the Canadian version of foreclosure, just jumped 59% in a single year. This is Ontario, the market that was never supposed to cool. The province your parents told you to buy into at any price, because prices only ever went one direction. And right now, while 5 other Canadian provinces are setting all-time price records, Ontario is posting the largest home price declines in the entire country. Bidding wars that lasted 90 minutes in 2021 have turned into listings that sit for 90 days. Sellers are slashing, inventory is piling up, and nobody is buying. And if you own a home in any of these regions, the only number that matters now is what your house is actually worth the day your mortgage comes up for renewal. In this countdown, we are exposing the 10 Ontario towns where the buyers walked away. Specific places, specific numbers, and the one structural reason underneath every single one of them. Let's break it down. Number 10, Barrie, the commuter city that ran out of commuters. Barrie was the classic Toronto escape. An hour up the 400, a real waterfront, and a detached house for half of what the same house cost in the city. For 3 years, that pitch printed money. Then the offices reopened. The median sold price in Barrie was $644,250 this June, down 8% from a year earlier, while new listings stayed plentiful. That means a typical Barrie owner watched more than $50,000 evaporate in 12 months, and the neighbors listing this summer are competing with a pile of inventory that keeps growing. Buying in Barrie in 2021 was a bet that the commute would never come back. The commute came back. Picture this. You drive through a subdivision on the south end, the kind that went up fast in 2021. 4 houses on the block have signs. 2 have already been relisted with a new brokerage, and a lower number, which is the polite way of admitting the first number was fiction. Barrie did not stall because people stopped wanting to live there. It stalled because the house was priced for a life where nobody commuted, and that life got cancelled. And Barrie is nowhere near the worst on this list. Number 9, Niagara Falls, the tourist capital where the sellers now outnumber the buyers. Across the Niagara region, which takes in Niagara Falls, St. Catharines, Welland, and Fort Erie, the benchmark price is down 6.3% over the past year, to $573,700. Homes are taking 49 days to sell instead of 40. The sales to listings ratio sits around 37%, and anything under 40 is a buyer's market by definition. Then there is the supply. New listings hit some of the highest June levels on record, and the association's own report says sellers remain as motivated as ever to find a buyer. Motivated is the polite word for something else. Buying in Niagara today is like walking into a store where every item has 3 price tags stapled on top of each other, and the clerk is watching your face to see which one you believe. Niagara Falls is not fading because the falls got smaller. It is fading because the region spent 3 years pricing itself for Toronto money, and Toronto money stopped showing up. Number 8, Kitchener-Waterloo, the tech capital with the strongest fundamentals on this list, and a market that still could not hold. The numbers, in order. Benchmark price, $642,000, down 5.5% in a year. Average detached, down almost 7%. Semi-detached, down close to 9%. Regional average price, down 6.5% to about $729,000. And sales, according to the local board itself, the slowest June on record. That means a buyer who stretched to $900,000 at the early 2022 peak is now living inside a $700,000 reality, roughly $170,000 underwater on paper, in a region that is doing everything right. 2 universities, a real tech sector, one of the youngest populations in the country. Every fundamental a market is supposed to want, and the buyers still said no. One local seller summed up the mood in a housing thread. Paraphrased. Their agent stopped talking about what the house would sell for and started talking about what it would take to sell it at all. When the strongest fundamentals on this list cannot hold the price was never the thing holding the market up. Number 7, Kawartha Lakes, the cottage country commute that stopped making sense. One rural Ontario homeowner described it plainly in a public housing discussion. They bought at the 2021 peak, then tried to sell twice, replacing the roof, the driveway, the appliances, and the well in between. The only offers that ever came in were 10% below what they originally paid. That is Kawartha Lakes in one household. Lindsay, Bob Cajun, Fenelon Falls, all of it boomed on one assumption: that remote work was permanent, and a 2-hour drive to Toronto was a problem for other people. The province's own assessment agency now lists Kawartha Lakes among the Ontario communities whose median home values have dropped back below the $750,000 mark. That club has shrunk from 105 communities in 2022 down to 65 today. Across the wider Peterborough and Kawartha's market, average prices have already given back roughly 7% in a single year. Here is the sharp contrast. Kawartha Lakes and Simcoe County both sold the same story to the same buyer. Simcoe kept enough year-round employment to hold a floor under its prices. Kawartha Lakes sold a lifestyle that only worked if the office never called. The lakes did not move, the offices did. And it turns out the offices were the entire business model. Number 6, Hamilton. The bellwether, and the one that should worry everybody else. Hamilton matters because Hamilton was the proof. A steel city an hour from Toronto that became one of the hottest housing markets in North America, and the standing argument that the boom could spread anywhere. Today, the Teranet National House Price Index shows Hamilton down 5.7% over the past year, one of the steepest declines among the 11 cities it tracks, behind only Toronto and Vancouver. But the price is not the interesting part. The sellers are. Investors who bought duplexes and multi-unit conversions for cash flow are quietly listing them, because at today's rates the rent no longer covers the mortgage. And the buyers who would normally absorb that inventory are other investors, running the exact same math and reaching the exact same answer. That means the exit door is crowded with the same people who forced prices up on the way in, and nobody is standing on the other side of the trade. Buying a Hamilton rental today is like taking the last chair in musical chairs after the music has already stopped. Hamilton is not correcting because the city got worse. It is correcting because the speculators are trying to sell to each other, and neither side is willing to go first. Keep that detail in mind, because it comes back at the end of this video, and it explains the town at number 1. Number 5, Collingwood, the ski town that priced out its own snow. Collingwood spent the pandemic as Ontario's four-season fantasy. Ski hills in January, Georgian Bay in July, and a flood of Toronto buyers who decided the weekend should be permanent. Prices behaved accordingly. Now the provincial assessment data tells the after story. Collingwood is named among the communities whose median home values have fallen back below $750,000. Across Ontario's recreational markets as a whole, waterfront prices dropped 5% last year to just over $809,000. Picture this. It is a Sunday in February. A couple who spent the winter renting a chalet a few concessions over are driving back to the city, and somewhere around Alliston, one of them says the quiet part out loud, that the rental cost them 4 weekends of money, and the purchase would cost them the next 25 years of it. They keep the deposit in the bank. That conversation is happening in 1,000 cars on that highway every winter weekend, and every one of them is a buyer who did not show up. The mountain did not close. A second home is simply the first thing a nervous household crosses off the list, and right now the whole province is nervous. Number 4, Cambridge, the town where the sellers are still living in 2022. Cambridge is where the standoff shows up most clearly. One frustrated local put it this way in an Ontario housing forum, paraphrased: "Sellers still believe their suburban detached is worth whatever the neighbor got 2 years ago. Buyers cannot carry that number at today's rates. So the house just sits until the listing quietly expires." The data sided with the buyers. The Cambridge benchmark price is $671,000, down 6.6% in a year, one of the steeper annual declines anywhere in Ontario. But here is the twist that makes Cambridge worth understanding, because it is the exception on this list. While Kitchener and Waterloo both posted double-digit sales declines, Cambridge sales actually rose more than 15% year over year. Read that carefully, because it is the whole video in one town. The buyers in Cambridge did not disappear. They came back the moment the price came down, and not 1 minute before. Selling in Cambridge right now is like refusing to drop the price of an umbrella after the rain has stopped. The sellers who cut the price are closing deals down the street. The ones still holding out for a storm that ended in 2022 are watching their listing quietly expire. Number 3. Niagara on the Lake. The shock entry on this list. The prettiest town in Ontario. The wine country postcard. The Shaw Festival. The Heritage Main Street. The place where nothing bad is supposed to happen to a property value. Here is the number. The sales to listings ratio in Niagara on the Lake is running around 20%. 20. For every 5 homes that come to market, 1 finds a buyer. The regional association's own leadership calls it a deep buyer's market and says openly that prices there may need to correct. And here is the contrast that matters. Lincoln, 20 minutes down the road, same region, same rates, same wineries, is running at 63%. Balanced, with a slight edge to sellers. Same highway, opposite outcomes. The difference is that Lincoln is priced for people who live there. Niagara on the Lake is priced for people who visit. Wealth was supposed to make this town immune. Instead, wealth made it optional. Nobody needs a heritage home in wine country. They want one, at the right price. And the right price is not the asking price. So the houses sit, beautifully staged, professionally photographed, and unsold through an entire season. Niagara on the Lake is not struggling because the town lost its charm. It is struggling because charm is the first luxury a buyer learns to live without. And that brings us to the real reason. Because here is what they are not telling you about every town so far. This is not simply high interest rates. Rates explain a slowdown. They do not explain what is actually happening in Ontario right now. Power of sale listings across the province are up 59% in a single year. Mortgage delinquencies have nearly doubled since early 2020, climbing from 0.13% to 0.24%, and Canada's National Housing Agency projects they keep climbing to a peak this year. Over $200 billion in Canadian mortgages come up for renewal in 2026. Loans signed at 1.5% or 2%, renewing at 4 or 5%, which turns into payment increases of $500 to $1,500 a month on the same house for the same family who did nothing wrong. And roughly 2/3 of Ontario's power of sale filings are being initiated by private lenders, not the major banks. That means the most stretched owners in the province are being forced onto the market at the exact moment buyers have all the leverage. So the sellers you are watching in every one of these towns are not casual. Some of them are not choosing to sell at all, which is exactly what makes the last 2 towns on this list so brutal. Number 2. Haliburton. The cottage dream, unwinding in real time. Haliburton was always the affordable Muskoka, the place a regular Ontario family could still touch a lake without a second mortgage. Then the remote workers arrived at peak prices, and the trap closed behind them. One buyer described the pattern exactly in an online discussion. Paraphrased, people bought 2 hours from the city believing the home office was permanent. Now the employer wants 3 days a week in the building. The commute is impossible. And selling means writing a 6-figure check to get out of a house they still live in. They are not homeowners anymore. They are hostages with a dock. The market data agrees. Across the core cottage country markets of Muskoka, Parry Sound, and Haliburton, sales fell another 12% last year, and Haliburton absorbed some of the sharpest price corrections in the province. List-to-sale ratios across the outlying lakes run around 93%, meaning sellers who do close are routinely handing back 7% off their asking price just to make it stop. That is not a negotiation. That is a toll. Haliburton did not fall because the lakes lost their pull. It fell because the whole dream was financed at 2%, and the refinancing just came due. Number 1. Gravenhurst, and the entire Muskoka shoreline behind it. The most famous cottage country on earth. The postcard Ontario mails to the rest of the world. And right now, the single most frozen housing market in the province. The numbers here do not whisper. 17.5 months of unsold supply against a 10-year average around 7, and nearly 3 times what a balanced market looks like. Sales in May, 44 transactions, down from 67 a year earlier. The sharpest drop of any region tracked in Ontario. and the median waterfront price, around $950,000, down from a peak of $1.235 million in 2022. That is a shoreline that has quietly surrendered nearly $300,000 of value per property, and the province's own assessment agency now lists Gravenhurst among the towns whose median values have dropped out of the $750,000 tier. But here is the part that should stop you, because it is the opposite of what everyone assumes. The market trackers report that buyer interest in Muskoka is the highest of any recreational region they measure, higher than Parry Sound, higher than Haliburton, higher than the provincial average. People still want Muskoka. They are searching, touring, dreaming. They are simply refusing to pay yesterday's price, because at 17 months of supply, every one of them knows the seller across the table needs the deal more than they do. Picture a September morning on a Muskoka lake. The water is glass. The Adirondack chairs are exactly where the photographer left them, and the for sale sign at the end of the driveway has been standing there long enough that the red has faded to pink. Muskoka is not frozen because the magic wore off. It is frozen because the magic got a price tag only strangers could afford. The strangers went home, and the families who actually belong to these lakes were quietly priced off their own shoreline. So there it is. 10 Ontario towns where the for sale sign stopped being a temporary inconvenience and started being part of the landscape. And the one structural reason underneath every single entry is the same. From 2020 to 2022, these towns were not priced for the people who live in them. They were priced by Toronto money passing through, and that money was resting on 4 assumptions: cheap debt, permanently; remote work, permanently; endless overflow out of the city; and prices that only ever go up. All 4 broke at once. The debt got expensive. The offices called everybody back. The overflow reversed direction, and the renewal wall is now forcing the most stretched sellers in the province to find out what their houses are actually worth, rather than what they were told they were worth. The buyers did not vanish. They went back to being local, and local paychecks were never able to carry exodus prices. That is what you are watching. Not a crash, a repricing, and it is landing hardest on exactly the places that benefited most from the stampede. If your town made this list, drop a comment with what you are seeing on your own street. The days on market, the price cuts, the relistings, I read every one of them. And if you want the other side of this data, subscribe, because the next video covers the Ontario towns where prices are quietly holding, and number 1 on that list is a town most people drive straight past without looking twice. See you in the next one.